How does one person decide to wipe an entire people off the face of the earth? I mean, what kind of hate even begins to justify gas chambers, death trains, and the systematic murder of millions? We're going to dive into one of the darkest chapters in human history. And it's a story that absolutely has to be told, not just to remember, but to truly understand.
This, right here, is the central, haunting question we're tackling. See, this isn't just about one dictator. It's the story of how contempt, fear, and just plain indifference can become weapons. Weapons deadlier than any army. So let's trace the path from a personal obsession to a total catastrophe.
To really get a grip on this, we have to go back, way back, long before the war, long before the title of Führer even existed. We have to go right back to the beginning, when this whole monumental tragedy was just a tiny seed of resentment growing in the heart of one failed young man.
And here's what's so astonishing. Before all the hatred, there was an ambition, and it was, believe it or not, a surprisingly harmless one, a dream of becoming an artist.
Yeah, in his youth, Adolf Hitler wasn't thinking about world domination. He was thinking about canvases and art exhibitions. When he was 18, he packed his bags and moved to the grand capital, Vienna, carrying a suitcase full of hopes and drawings. His goal? To get into the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts.
But Vienna had other plans for him. The Academy, well, they just didn't see the talent he saw in himself. He was rejected, not once, but twice. Can you imagine? Humiliated, with no direction, he started wandering the city, living in homeless shelters, even selling postcards just to get by. And every single rejection, every failure, it just piled up inside him like kindling. And it was during this dark, lonely time that he found some new companions, really dangerous ideas. Because you have to understand, Vienna in the early 20th century wasn't just a center for culture, it was a boiling pot of political tension, aggressive nationalism, and some deeply, deeply rooted racism. Now, this is absolutely crucial to get. All of Hitler's personal frustration started to find a target, an external target. He learned to blame other people for his own failures. Because, let's be honest, hating someone else is a whole lot easier than accepting you just weren't good enough. He found a story for his failure. A simple, false, but dangerously effective one.
And Vienna was the perfect breeding ground for this kind of ideological poison. I mean, you had pamphlets everywhere spouting conspiracy theories, so-called science, talking about racial purity as if it was a fact. Anti-Semitism wasn't some fringe idea. It was a common political tool with a long, dark history in Europe. For a lost, angry young man like Hitler, this was a revelation. It gave a name to his rage.
Hitler actually watched the popular mayor of Vienna, a guy named Karl Lueger, and he took notes. Lueger was charismatic, and he was openly anti-Semitic. And he proved that you could blame a minority and get applause, votes, and ultimately power. Hitler was learning his first big lesson. Organized hatred could be an incredible tool for getting the masses on your side.
Now, the ideas Hitler soaked up in Vienna didn't just disappear. They festered, waiting for a spark. And they found it in the trauma and humiliation of a global conflict that was about to change absolutely everything.
He eagerly volunteered for the German army, serving as a messenger on the Western Front. He was wounded, he was decorated, and he was marked by it forever. But you know, it wasn't the fighting that left the deepest scar on him. It was the end. When Germany surrendered in 1918, Hitler just couldn't process it. To him, it didn't feel like a real military defeat. So it had to be something else, a betrayal.
And just like that, this incredibly dangerous myth was born, the stab-in-the-back theory. It claimed Germany wasn't defeated on the battlefield, but was betrayed from the inside. It was a complete lie, a baseless conspiracy. But for a nation that felt humiliated by defeat and was being crippled by the Treaty of Versailles, it was a story that really hit home. The trauma of defeat didn't create Hitler, but boy, did it give him his cause.
So, in the total chaos of 1920s Germany, a country just ravaged by war and hyperinflation, Hitler started to weaponize this myth. He turned his personal hatred into a political strategy.
He certainly didn't invent anti-Semitism, but he perfected its use in politics. In his book, My Struggle, he laid out his chilling worldview for everyone to see. Germany could only be saved through an authoritarian ruler, by conquering new territory for the so-called superior race, and, of course, by getting rid of the Jews.
So how did he pull it off? Well, the Nazi method was pretty systematic. First, you identify a clear enemy.
Next, you build a spectacle. All those torchlit marches, the mass rallies, it was like a giant, dark theater production designed to make people feel like they were part of something huge and powerful. He promised jobs and national pride, and in return, he demanded just one thing: your absolute, blind obedience.
And then, 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Suddenly, the ideology of hate wasn't just angry rhetoric shouted in beer halls anymore. It was the law of the land. The state itself began to reflect his obsession, and the worst was only just getting started. Once Hitler was in power, a precise, meticulous, and frankly industrial machine was built, a structure designed not just to isolate people, but to systematically eliminate them.
It all began with these seemingly small, insidious steps. Propaganda relentlessly painted Jews as parasites, as less than human. Then came the law, stripping them of their citizenship and their basic rights. They were forced to wear the Star of David, kicked out of their homes, and herded into overcrowded ghettos. Each step made people a little more numb, and made the next, more horrifying step seem possible.
You can see the progression. From legal discrimination in 1933, the path led to the violent attacks of Kristallnacht in 1938. Then, in 1942, came this cold, bureaucratic phrase for something truly unspeakable: the final solution. At the Wannsee Conference, total extermination became official, documented state policy.
Camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor were built with a terrifying efficiency. Their design left no room for error. Train arrives, selection, gas chamber, crematorium, and then repeat. This wasn't some moment of madness. It was a system designed by bureaucrats, engineers, and doctors. It shows just how far a civilization can fall when its moral compass is completely shattered. Eventually, the war ended. The guns fell silent. But the horror did not. The Holocaust left a permanent scar in human history, and with it, a profound and necessary duty for all of us to remember.
2 words. It's a promise. It's a warning. But just saying them isn't enough. It's so important to understand that remembering is not a passive thing. It's an urgent, active commitment to recognize how hatred is born, how it spreads, and why we must always stand against it.
Because here's the thing: hatred doesn't die. It just changes its clothes. It disguises itself as ideology or politics or patriotism, and it always finds new victims. That's why the Holocaust isn't just history. It's a mirror. It forces us to look at our own world and ask, where do we see these warning signs today? And more importantly, what are we willing to do about it?